Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Odd Vlog. And just following on from where we were in the last episode, we're going to start off really just by talking through the new kind of teaser trailer for episode 9 for Star Wars, and just kind of going through some of the thoughts and theories that people have got. And shout out to Chloe and Gina as well for helping me come up with a lot of the ideas that we're going to go through, a lot of the theories, and a few questions that we're going to think about. It's an amazing teaser. It's really, really cool. Some great scenes in it, particularly at the beginning when you've got the flip, I think, as it's being referred to, with Rey basically in her saber jumping up in the air as Ben comes flying at her. So things like that, just very, very cool. And then obviously at the end you've got what we think is the Death Star, or the remains of it, I suppose, that has the Emperor in it somehow with his cackle at the end, which is quite a poignant moment. It all came about obviously from Star Wars Celebration, and if you've seen it and you've got, I can't remember his name, the actor who plays Palpatine walking out stage saying "roll it again" in that voice was just absolutely immense, and it kind of confirms that he's definitely going to be in the movie. So very cool. So we're going to run through some of these theories, a whole list of questions that I'm going to try and answer, and then we're going to finish with basically probably what is going to be, I think, the biggest theory and plot line that we're going to get in this film. So I have had to write all of this out, so bear with me for reading from this book. But basically, first thing is obviously the title, The Rise of Skywalker. Now it's a little bit conflicting because as far as we know, this film brings an end to the Skywalker saga. So what does it really mean? Because it kind of suggests that actually it's going to carry on, and it's going to give rise to either a new generation of Skywalkers as a family, or you know, whatever it might be. So the first thing is basically the Rise of Skywalker is an idea and not linked to a person. A new generation of Force users will be known as Skywalkers, and they will be grey. So, first of all, grey Jedi, for those that don't know, are not Sith and they're not Jedi. They kind of fit in the middle, so they kind of see things from both sides. And I do think that's really appropriate because the whole way through, ever since Luke Skywalker first came along, the whole idea is that someone is bringing balance to the Force, and they assumed it was Anakin, and then they assumed it was Luke. And it hasn't really worked out. There's always been Sith and there's always been Jedi. So in order for there to be balance, there has to be kind of one of each, if you like, on each side. And as soon as one rises, the other comes to meet it. So the idea that now we're going to see grey Jedis, I think, is very cool. Something I definitely want to see in the film, and I had hoped that they would have started doing that from episode 7, really, going through. And I kind of thought that it was about time, and it's a good way for them to, as they keep on saying, end the Sith, end the Jedi, and to bring balance to the Force. It's the perfect way to do it. So yeah, the idea that Skywalker is no longer going to be a person. Skywalker is going to be the name of this group of Jedi, if you like, that are effectively grey Jedis, and that will be what they're known as going forward. It's a brilliant theory. I really, really like that, and I think that'd be really cool. And it does make sense because it does bring an end to the Skywalker saga, which is what this film is supposed to do. But it means that the title works because something does rise up, it does carry on, and there's a legend then that continues through canon. So yeah, very cool. I really, really like that. The second point here is that it could also link into Ben rising to the light and calling himself Skywalker. Well, obviously, yes, he is technically a Skywalker. And also, I think this is something that we will see. I think he will turn to the light. It's always been about redemption and kind of making up for mistakes, and I think it's going to be quite poignant, really, if Kylo Ren, Ben Solo, does become Skywalker, takes the name of Skywalker, and turns to the light, and that could be his way of sort of the Rise of Skywalker carrying on. He actually turns out to be the hero and saves it. Which leads me on to the next point, is that the start scene is Kylo training Rey to fight something greater. I've heard this theory a lot, I've seen it quite a lot. The whole idea is that when you see the flip, they're not actually fighting, they are actually training, and they're working together to fight something that's even bigger and greater. Now, could be Palpatine, could be something else, who knows? But I can see why people are suggesting that, and there's a whole great big fan base of people that want to see Reylo as a thing, with Rey and Kylo kind of getting together effectively, and starting off this thing. So it could kind of work. Obviously it would mean, yeah, that Ben would rise to the light. Could also mean that Rey falls to the dark, and then after that they both snap out of it, for want of a better way to put it, and start to work together to fight something. Presumably the Emperor. We don't know. We hear his cackle, we hear his laugh. So where does that lead? Well, the Emperor could be. The Emperor is going to be either a clone or his spirit is attached to something crazy like an alternative Force ghost. Well, yeah, similar. And actually, we'll come on to that in a bit more detail later, because I think that's probably going to be the biggest thing, really. I've always sort of said, well, if Darth Maul can survive the way that he allegedly dies in Episode 1, and we know that he doesn't because he appears in Solo later on, and also throughout canon, he does reappear in other places as well. So if he's able to survive not just being thrown down some sort of weird, massive, long vent thing, but also being cut in half, then why couldn't the Emperor? It's a similar death, but obviously not exactly the same. But if one can survive it, why can't the other? And again, I'll come on to that a little bit later as to why I think he could have survived it, but I don't think that's what they're going to be doing in this film. I don't think he's actually alive. I think he's kind of going to be around through another means. So we'll come on to that in a second. So now we've got a list of questions, and I'm going to see if I can answer these as best I can. Or I'm just going to give my opinion, and you can comment down below if you think I'm right or wrong. Probably wrong. So the first one, did Rey fix her saber herself, and is it extendable now? I'm going to assume she did. She's fairly handy as a former kind of scavenger, if you like. So we've seen some close-up still images now of the actual saber and what she's done. So there's effectively a melt strip that goes around it with, I think, brown leather or something like that. Where she's effectively taken both halves of the saber, stuck them back together again, and then done a bit of a botch job, really. Good looking botch job, but still. I think, yeah, she probably has fixed it herself. I don't think she's had any help doing that. Made me wonder whether or not she's becoming familiar with things like kyber crystals and whether or not she's been using those, or certainly she's had access to them now. Is it extendable? Probably not. A lot of people want her to attach it to her staff that she uses or have a double-ended saber. Can't rule it out, but there's nothing in the images of that particular saber that we've seen that would make me think that that was going to happen. But it would be kind of cool if they did. Second question, why isn't Kylo shooting at Rey? Well, as we touched on before, it might be that there's actually them training and working together to fight something else. So that could be a very good reason. And it is a very good question because it's a really good point. He's there in his ship, he's flying straight at her, he never even once puts his finger on a trigger. Fires at her, and you'd sort of think, well, if he wanted to kill her, that probably would be the easiest way to do it, rather than just flying at somebody who jumps over you. So yeah, it's a good point, and it does tend to suggest, I think it's the biggest hint really, that they could actually be working together in some way, for some reason. Third question, is Luke's voiceover what his Force Ghost is saying to Rey? This is at the beginning of the trailer and then at the very end as well, where you hear Luke's voice talking, basically saying about how, you know, there's been 1,000 years of a generation of Force users or whatever, but that this is effectively their fight now, this is what they've got to do, and blah 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 blah, and no one is ever really gone. Could well be, and we know that Luke is going to appear in it to some extent. Mark Hamill said it's pretty much just a cameo, it's not really like a full-on thing. So yeah, it probably will be his Force Ghost. Whether or not those are the actual words or lines that he uses, it might be that they just did that for the trailer, I don't know. But it's a good line, and it's quite a good way of kind of saying that, you know, Luke's had his time, the original trilogy is well and truly gone, and now it's time for them to step up and fight and win their own battle without having to rely on the help of the previous generation, if you like. Who is Kylo fighting, and is he with the Knights of Ren? Knights of Ren is a very good point, because it's been referred to a couple of times and we've never really seen anything of it, and I'd like to see it because I don't really know much about them, so I'd like to be able to learn what they do. Originally I thought, are they supposed to be like a collective of Force users? I'm not really sure about that, but I would like to see them just because it's different and we've not really had anything like that, and visually I think they look really cool from some of the sort of artwork that we've seen of them. Whether or not he is actually fighting with them, I've no idea, and who he's fighting against, haven't got a clue, couldn't tell you. People, yeah, there we are. Who is modifying Kylo's helmet and why? No idea, but it was very cool actually. And at Star Wars Celebration, there was someone who had done cosplay, and it must have been a very last minute thing where they've actually taken the Kylo Ren helmet and have had the red lines all over it. It looks very good. It looks very menacing. Why they're doing it, I've no idea. I assume it's just an aesthetic thing. I don't really know, but very cool. It is very cool. And of course, now that Snoke's not there, who probably, by the sounds of things, had a problem with him wearing that helmet in the first place, He's now able to wear it whenever he wants and modify it, but he's not wearing it in that fight scene. So I'm not really sure quite what they're doing with it and why, but it does look good. It was something I noticed. Right, next question. Who is holding Luke's medal and why? Now, I think this is the medal from episode 4, where they've blown up the first Death Star or whatever, and they get given the medallions at the end, or medals or whatever, in that kind of ceremony. It was how the first film finishes, and quite a good moment of all lined up on the stage getting these medals. I assume that Leia is holding it. I don't really know. We've never seen it again since episode 4. I don't think it's reappeared ever at any point. But it's quite a good little Easter egg there if you recognise what it is and you can see it. I assume that Leia has it and maybe she's passing it on to Rey, possibly. I'm not really sure. Or maybe it's after Ben turns to the light and he gets it or something, and maybe that's the thing that makes him think, actually, I want to be known as a Skywalker. So, who knows? But it could be really important, actually. It might be more than just an Easter egg. Next question, is that the Death Star 2? Well, I think so, and I think a lot of people are assuming so. It does tie in with a lot of these theories that we've got here, that it probably is, and it does make sense. They all seem to be going on some kind of quest or something, and J.J. Abrams had said in the panel that they were all together collectively going on to find something. Some time has passed since the previous film, and they're going on some kind of journey, some kind of quest to find something. So it could be, it could be the Death Star, or the second Death Star, that's there. And of course, that's when you hear Palpatine's laugh. So there's obviously a connection there to it somewhere. But I do think it's the Death Star 2. I can't think of what else it would be that would be relevant or recognisable. So I do think it's that. So the next question leads on quite well. Is Palpatine alive, or is that his Force ghost that's laughing, or is he transferred to another being? Well, we're going to talk about the transfer in a minute in quite a bit of depth. But yeah, he could be alive, because as I say, if Darth Maul can survive the way that he allegedly died and didn't, then why couldn't Palpatine, who's more powerful? So surely you'd think he's got the ability to do it, but it could just be his Force ghost. Who knows? Or he could have transferred to an object or a person or a being that's in there. We'll wait and see. But I think he's alive somehow. Sorry. Will Palpatine merge with Rey and turn her to the dark side? Well, a similar sort of concept really is that if he does have this ability to transfer from his previous physical body into a new one, or his spirit is just wandering around, or has currently put his spirit into an object waiting for someone to come along, you know, it could be like a trap. It could be that Rey's actually going to go in there and she's going to get turned. It could be that he's kind of waiting for her to appear, a perfect vessel for him to kind of take over, and then carry on as, you know, one of the most powerful Sith ever. It's a good theory. My voice is going for some reason. I'm really sorry. So yeah, that was quite cool. I kind of want to see Rey turn to the dark side. I think it would just be really, really good, and I think it's quite a good way to have Ben switch to the light and Rey switch to the dark, and that in doing so they become more powerful, and then they come together, and then they become grey, and then they both have an understanding of each other and how they use the Force. I think that would really, really work. And it does lead into them becoming grey quite well. So it's a good theory. I quite like it. I do think that that's a possibility. Someone suggested that Disney probably wouldn't go for Rey turning to the dark. Maybe, possibly. I think it depends, because if they do then turn grey, there's kind of a silver lining and a happy ending to it. So it might not necessarily be that it's the be-all or end-all, but I think visually as a thing, there's been so much kind of fan art and concept art of her as a Sith, and always looked really, really cool. So I think I would like to see that happen. I don't know. I think it's a good theory. I think it's a good question, and we'll see what happens in December. Right, a few more questions. So, will Kylo take the Skywalker name and turn to the light? Well, we've already kind of touched on that. I hope so. I think that is a good possibility. I think it's quite highly likely. But then nothing is impossible in this. So who knows? Will it end with the two of them becoming grey? Well, as I say, yeah, I think so. I hope so. I do really want to see Grey Jedi in this, because it's something that people who aren't overly familiar with Star Wars and the canon and haven't read the books, Grey Jedi is a bit of an unknown to them. I just think it's a really nice way to end the Jedi and the Sith, bring the balance that constantly is being talked about throughout this entire saga. And it's just, I think, a great way of doing it. And also, if you think about it, it's kind of a good metaphor for life generally. You know, things are grey. There's no black and white and wrong. There's usually a bit of a blur across the line, somewhere along the line. So it's workable in a modern kind of day and age, and I think it would really work. So yeah, I'd like to see Grey Jedi in some manner or another, and if it's going to be in this film with the two of them starting it off, then fantastic. And who knows, as we say, maybe Grey Jedi will be known as Skywalkers, and I think that would be really brilliant. So the last question is, does this end the Jedi and the Sith for good? Well, as we say, if it brings balance, we've seen Kylo constantly mentioning it, end the Jedi, end the Sith, bring them to a close. What a perfect way to do it. Not to end Force users, but to put Force users in a position where they are kind of neutral. They can see both sides of the argument, and this is the way that you kind of then end like 1,000-2,000 years worth of fighting and conflict between Jedi and Sith, and now finally you have that balance, and you kind of have that peace that comes from it. I think that, to me, is a great way for the Skywalker saga to end. We don't know whether or not there's going to be any kind of future films, but from what we've heard, any more trilogies are going to be going back to the past, 1,000 years ago, before Episode 1, and back to the origins of the Old Republic, the origins of the Sith and Jedi and all those original characters, which would be very good, I think. So it might be that this is a great way to kind of end the, if you like, the current period of time, the timeline. You go through all of the saga, the Skywalker saga, with it ending as Grey Jedi. There's no Jedi, there's no Sith, there's just serenity, I suppose, which I think kind of works. I think it's really good. So we're going to come on now to this kind of big topic, and I've had a look at Wikipedia, you know what I mean, at transfer essence, and this is something that someone mentioned to me as being probably what we're going to see Palpatine doing in the remnants of the Death Star. So for those that don't know, transfer essence, I'm going to read out a little bit about what it actually is and how it actually works, and then I'm going to kind of tell you why I think this is what we're going to see, and I think it ties in beautifully with all three trilogies being linked together through this idea. It actually links Episode 3 all the way up to Episode 9, and to some extent you could even say it's not the Skywalker saga, it's the Palpatine saga, but we'll get onto that. So transfer essence is a radical dark side force power used to transfer a person's consciousness into another body, or in some cases in an inanimate object. Ancient Sith Lords used the technique to cheat death again and again, haunting their tombs and possessing those who stumbled across their tombs in order to continue their reign of terror. So this is the whole idea, that when Palpatine, the Emperor, whatever you want to call him, gets killed by Vader, his spirit is able to escape from the physical body and attach itself to the Death Star, presumably the tomb of the Death Star that he ends up in, or an object or some other being that's in there. I just think that's a brilliant idea. I think that's fantastic, and it would make sense for him to have been able to survive somehow, to do it that way and kind of attach himself spiritually to the remains of the Death Star that we see in that teaser. So he's in there somewhere, in there somehow, ready and waiting for someone to kind of stumble across his tomb, tomb, and this is how he is able to kind of carry on. So he's not physically survived his death scene, but his spirit is still there. It's haunting that tomb, and that's how he's able to effectively live on. So yeah, it might be that Palpatine has transferred into the ruins of the Death Star and now haunts it, and I think that's a fantastic theory. I think it really works. And the reason why I think that whole idea ties in so beautifully with the entire three trilogies and the whole saga is you could go right back to Episode 3 and Revenge of the Sith, and think of the scene where Chancellor Palpatine is explaining to Anakin the whole idea of a quest for greater power and the tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise. So a Sith legend where Darth Plagueis was a Darth Lord of the Sith, so powerful and wise he could use the Force to create life, and he could even cheat death. Now, actually, when he's explaining it, he's not talking about cheating his own death. He's talking about saving the people that he loved, and that's the thing that kind of brings Anakin to the dark side, if you like. That's the inducement for him. And he then goes on to say he taught his apprentice everything he knew, and then his apprentice killed him in his sleep. Well, I'm pretty certain that Palpatine was the apprentice to Darth Plagueis and was the one that killed him. But it's the fact that he taught his apprentice everything he knew. So if Plagueis was actually wise enough to know how to cheat death, and this was possibly the way to do it, he now knows how to do that. So you would, wouldn't you? Surely, if you're gonna die and you're in a fight with Darth Vader and you're losing and you suddenly find yourself falling down a big hole, and you know how to do this because you've been trained, you've been taught, you would do it, surely. To detach your spirit from your body, attach it to presumably the Death Star, or something within it, and that's where he remains. And I think there's just a brilliant symmetry there from episode 3. I'm going to get my numbers wrong here. From episode 3 to episode 6 to episode 9, where you go from him explaining how he basically was that apprentice, that he knew or was taught how to cheat death. Then you jump to episode 6 where he actually does it, and then episode 9 where we kind of find out that he does it, and we actually then see, you know, all three of those trilogies linking together through that storyline. I think that's brilliant, and I really, really hope that they do that. Whether or not he passes himself spiritually through to Rey and turns her, that's a whole other thing. But I think that's brilliant, and it might be that, you know, maybe he doesn't put his spirit into Rey or anybody that we know. Maybe he puts it into something else. It's interesting because a lot of people have said, well, was his spirit attached to Snoke in any particular way? Well, I don't think so, and I think Snoke is such a waste of time as a character. Really, really wasted. Had so much potential and they never really used him. It'll be interesting to see whether he comes back in any particular way, but I'm just not sure. I think this is probably the way to go because it's the bigger villain. You know, if Darth Vader was supposed to be the big villain, well, the Emperor was the one behind him who was the bigger villain, and I think, you know, maybe that is still the case, and it's been like that ever since episode 1, all the way through to the end. So the Skywalker saga is not just a story of going from Anakin to Luke to Ben/Rey. We don't really know Rey's background. I had wondered, and I've seen this mentioned before, could Rey actually be a Palpatine? Is that her heritage? Is that where she comes from? Is it that she got dumped on this planet to survive by herself because someone was trying to get her out of the reach of Palpatine, who could have been her father? Don't know. Just going to throw that out there. But it does explain a few things because she has a very strong connection to the Force. We know that. But she does have a strong connection to the dark side, even if she's not using it. And the reason we know that is because of the last film, in episode 8, she goes straight to the dark, as Luke describes it during their training. So maybe that's the reason why. Maybe her connection to the Force is actually through the dark side, because she's got that in her blood, in her heritage. I don't think she's a Skywalker. I think that would just be too predictable. I think it'd be too much. So I think it's more likely, more plausible, that she could actually be a Palpatine. It's an interesting story, an interesting theory, and we'll see what happens. But certainly I think we are going to see this transfer essence coming along somewhere, because, yeah, the Emperor, as we know, is going to feature in this film somehow. It makes sense. It ties it all together beautifully. And then who knows, at the end of it, we may very well end up with Grey Jedi. So I'm all for that. So that's it. I'd love to hear any more comments or ideas that you have, so please do leave them down below, and hit me up on Twitter if you've got any questions or any more feedback you want to give. Please give the video a like and share it if you can, and yeah, comment down below with any other suggestions that you have. What did you think of the trailer? What ideas, anything that we've not touched on, any kind of theories that you have, anything else that you picked up on in the trailer. It's a brilliant trailer. If I remember, we'll put a link to it actually in the description below, so if you haven't seen it, check it out, and then you'll know what I've been talking about for the last 25 minutes. So with that said, I think we are all done. In the next couple of videos, we're going to talk about The Mandalorian and Galaxy's Edge. Not sure which will be first, but one or the other. So with that said, we're done, and stay tuned, and I'll see you guys real soon.